Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we are tackling one of the most confusing topics in flight sim automation, the alphabet soup of variables and events in Microsoft Flight Simulator. If you've ever tried to set up a StreamDeck button, configure a hardware panel, or use something like Hangar Control, you've probably run into terms like SimVars, K events, LVars, H events, and B events, and you probably thought, what the heck is the difference? Well, by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what each one does, when to use them, how to find the right one for whatever you're trying to control. So without any further delay, let's dive in. One app designed to do it all. Hangar Control brings everything together: control bindings, hardware configuration, mod and profile management, application launching, add-ons, config files, and more, all managed from a single application. Mods Hangar goes beyond just mods and add-ons. It manages profiles, config files, text files, backups, snapshots, and helps keep your community folders clean and organized. Application Hangar launches your entire sim stack with a single click. Your StreamDecks are fully controlled through the Hangar Control plugin, while all of your other StreamDeck plugins remain active and available. Built by a simmer for simmers, Hangar Control adds new features and hardware support every week based on community feedback. It's a one-time purchase with lifetime updates, no subscriptions. You can try it for free for 5 days with no restrictions at overkillsimulations.com. Just create an account, head to your account page, download the latest version, and get started. And if you're looking for in-depth Microsoft Flight Simulator aircraft tutorials, check out my Patreon site. Links to Hangar Control and Patreon are down in the description below. Okay, so I am going to try to keep the pace pretty steady, guys. Just a heads up, I did write this entire script out because I know this is very dry material, and so I'm going to try to get through this as relatively quickly and painless as possible while still giving you the information you need. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So before we get into the specific types, let's understand the fundamental differences. In Microsoft Flight Simulator, there are two basic categories. You have variables and you have events. You need to think of variables like reading a gauge. They tell you the current state of something. What's my altitude? Is the landing gear down? What's the autopilot set to? Variables are for reading information. Events are like pressing a button. They make something happen. Flip the master battery switch, raise the flaps, disconnect the autopilot. Events are for doing things. Now, here's where it gets interesting. There are multiple types of variables and multiple types of events, and they serve different purposes. So let's try to break them down one by one. So for SimVars, short for simulation variables, are official variables built into the simulator itself. These are documented by Microsoft and Asobo, and they work across all aircraft. I will have a link to the Microsoft SDK sim variables down below if you're interested in looking for yourself. It's a great resource. So SimVars are primarily for reading data. Again, like we talked before, what's your current airspeed, your current heading, your fuel quantity? These are all SimVars. Now, some SimVars are read-only, and I think this is the part where it starts to get confusing for some, meaning you can only check their value. Others are read and write, meaning you can also set their value directly, but generally, when you want to change something, you'll use an event instead. But we'll talk about some of the caveats to that later on. SimVars follow a naming convention. They look like airspeed indicated, autopilot heading lock direction, or gear handle position. Notice they use regular words with spaces. Okay. So airspeed indicated is going to give you your current indicated airspeed. Plane altitude, altitude in feet. Autopilot master, is the autopilot on? Usually going to be a 1 or a 0. Flap handle index, this is the current flap position. You're going to see things like 0, 1, 2, okay? And a gear handle position, again, usually a 1 or a 0. So the key points to pay attention to this is it's built into the simulator. These usually work amongst all aircraft. The document, again, is provided down in the description below, but these are come directly from Microsoft/Asobo. And they are primarily for reading aircraft value or state values. However, as we talked previously, some are read-only and some are read and write. A real quick example of one that is a read and write would be your trim, elevator trim. It is a variable that you can see the current position, but you can also edit it directly, or you can edit the rate at which it changes. Now, K events, these are the most popular, but K events, or also known as key events, are the official commands once again built into the sim. These are actions you can trigger, the same ones you bind your keybinds to or your joystick buttons to. K stands for key, as in keyboard. These are the same events the sim uses when you press a key. When you bind G to toggle the landing gear, you are binding it to a K event called gear toggle. K events use underscores instead of spaces. They are describe actions. You'll see names like toggle underscore master underscore battery, flaps down, autopilot master, and parking brakes, all separated by an underscore instead of a space. Some K events are simple on-off toggles. Others accept a value. For example, heading bug set lets you set a specific value like 270 for west, meaning when you trigger that event, you will see your heading bug go directly to 270 rather than seeing it scroll slowly across the compass rose one side or the other. It will just boom, as soon as you press the button, your heading bug is immediately at 270. So just like SimVars, K events are universal. They work across all aircraft, but there's a catch. Not every aircraft actually implements every K event. A simple Cessna doesn't have an auto brake system, so the auto brake K event won't do anything. So again, coming back to your examples, make sure you guys pay close attention to the naming and the writing scheme of a K event so they're easier to identify. Now this is the part where things start to get confusing. So I'm going to tell you guys ahead of time. Most situations, I prefer to stay on the SimConnect side, meaning your K events, then go into LVars. Whenever possible, I use K events. Again, keeps it simple. It's already in the sim. And then when I must, I use LVars. So let's talk about what an LVar is. A very, very popular developer, guys, that is very heavy on LVars is going to be Black Square. So getting into the fun stuff, LVars, or local variables, are custom variables created by the aircraft developer themselves. The L stands for local, as in local to that specific aircraft. When PMDG builds their 737 or Phoenix makes their A320, they need to track things that don't exist in the standard sim variables. Things like switch positions, custom states, FMC pages, and so on. They usually will create an LVar for this. Now, there's a catch to that. You could also find things such as B events. B events are become very, very popular in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So just stay with me on the LVars. LVars are read and write. You can check their value and set their value directly. This is huge because it lets you control aircraft systems by changing the variable directly without needing a separate event that corresponds with a variable. The catch: every aircraft developer uses their own naming scheme. PMDG might call something like PMDG 737 MCP heading select. Notice that LVars also use the underscore separations. Phoenix might call something similar the A32NX, or actually, that would be fly-by-wire. That was a bad example. Fly-by-wire might be using something like A32NX FCU heading manage. So there's no standard with an LVar is the idea that you need to get across. Every single developer can name something completely different. You can have two developers. The example that I was trying to hit here, coming off script for a minute, was Phoenix and Fly-by-Wire both have an A320. However, on the FCU heading managed button, they may title them something completely different, and both work obviously perfectly fine for their aircraft. Again, coming back to an LVar is specific to the developer, and they can name them whatever they want. This is why complex add-on aircraft often publish documentation listing their LVars. It's essential reading if you want to integrate with their systems. So the example here, again, coming back to Black Square, one of the things that I really love about Black Square manuals, when you guys install a Black Square aircraft, check the manual. Usually down towards the bottom of the Black Square aircraft, he lists everything. He will have your variables for gauges, your controls for switch. A lot of his switches are often triggered in the sim by a circuit. Okay, so electrical underscore circuit, and you usually have an associated number. So you need to make sure that you do check the documentation of an aircraft that's third party when you're struggling to bind your controls. Next up, we have H events. H events are for interacting with glass cockpits and modern avionics, such as the G1000 and G3000, etc. The H stands for HTML. Because most modern cockpit displays in Microsoft Flight Simulator are actually built using web technology, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, for those of you who are familiar with those terms. HTML is usually your coding, how something does what it does. CSS is usually your styling, how it looks, how it feels. And then JavaScript is usually your integration points. Okay, when you click a button on a G1000 or an FMC, you're triggering on most aircraft, again, especially in 2024, an H event. These events let you simulate, nice speaking, those clicks programmatically without actually clicking the screen. H events typically follow a naming pattern that includes the instrument name and the specific button or function, something like AS1000 PFD softkeys _1. Again, H events will follow that underscore delimitation. That is one of the big things that I want to point out at this point in the tutorial, is if you guys notice, LVars or SimVars are really the only ones that don't use an underscore. LVars use an underscore. B events use an underscore. K events use an underscore, and H events use an underscore. So when you see an item that does not carry an underscore, it's a very good indicator that that is a SimVar, or a sim variable, as we discussed first. And that's why we went there first. Okay, now the tricky thing about H events is they're not always documented. Sometimes you have to use a tool that monitors H events, usually like the Microsoft Flight Simulator Behaviors tool, for an example, to figure out what gets triggered when you click different buttons. H events are one way. They trigger actions but don't return any data. If you need to know the state of something, that's when you would typically use an LVar instead, or a sim variable, AVAR, if it's available for that particular action item. Which, by the way, as of the time of recording this video and the release of 1.14 for Hangar Control or above, H events are now supported. Now coming up to what I would say is the biggest one of the times, if you will, with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. B events are also input events, and they are the newest addition to the Microsoft Flight Simulator variable system. We saw them slightly in 2020, but not near to the load that you will see them in 24. They were added by Asobo to provide a more standardized way to interact with cockpit elements. Think of B events as the new evolution, after H events. While H events grew organically, and every developer did their own thing, B events were designed from the start to be consistent and discoverable. Okay, again, this is where the behaviors tool in Microsoft Flight Simulator comes from. You can enable that by using the developer mode, and then up at the top of developer mode, there's a button that says tools, and tools, you hit the drop sign and hit behavior tools. The big advantage of B events is that they are enumerable, meaning tools can automatically discover what B events an aircraft supports. We can do the same thing with LVars right now. With the latest development, or the latest release, of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, now using the WASM modules, the same way that we can discover a LVar event, we can now automatically discover a B event with that specific aircraft. Meaning that, for example, tools like Hangar Control can bring up the list of B events that exist within an aircraft all by itself. With H events, you often had to guess or monitor. With B events, you can query the aircraft and get a list. B events also support more complex interactions. They can return values, accept parameters, and provide a more structured way to interact with cockpit elements. The downside, not all aircraft are supporting them yet. Older aircraft and some third-party add-ons still only use H events and LVars. But for newer aircraft, especially default Microsoft Flight Simulator planes and modern add-ons, B events are the way to go. An example here that you may run into that is sort of a hodgepodge. The default Microsoft Flight Simulator Cessna 172. Avionics Bus 1 uses a K event by default. So SimConnect, just Avionics 1 master on, off, works just fine. But for many who have now discovered this, Avionics Bus 2 didn't even work with Avionics Master on. You had to find the B event and bind it separately. Now, Avionics Master 1, just a tip, does also have a B event, so you can do both. But that was a very big gotcha that was getting a lot of us when Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 first launched, is that you had the B event on Bus 2, but the K event would work on Bus 1. Anyways, so that's the big thing with B events now, is hopefully in the future, as things begin to standardize, they may even start to replace LVars completely, and certainly H events. So here I have included a quick cheat sheet. If you guys are wanting to take a screenshot of this or save this, this would be a great time to do that. So let's put it all together in this cheat sheet that you can reference at any time, and I hope this helps you guys. So the flow chart, when deciding what to use, ask yourself these questions. Do I need to read a value or make something happen? If you need to read, you're looking for a SimVar or an LVar. If you need to do something, you're using an event, a K, an H, or a B. Now remember, unfortunately, there are caveats when it comes to that. The elevator trim is a perfect example of a time where a sim variable can be used. Okay, but it is rare and far and few between when you would edit an AVAR directly. Is it a standard sim function or custom to this aircraft? If it's standard, meaning you find it in just about every plane there is, you're probably going to be looking for a SimVar, again, or a K event. If it's a custom aircraft, Black Square, Phoenix, etc., you're going to be looking for an LVar, an H event, or a B event. Is it a physical switch or a glass cockpit operation? If it's a physical switch, you're going to be looking at a K event or a B event, or possibly an LVar again for third-party aircraft. If it's a glass cockpit, you're probably going to be looking for an H event or a B event. Now for the practical part. How do you actually find the right variable or event you want to do? For SimVars and K events, the Microsoft Flight Simulator SDK documentation is your Bible in this case. Microsoft maintains a complete list of all SimVars and K events. It's usually updated with every sim update as well. So every time you see a new sim update, there will usually be a release of a SDK. So just search for Microsoft Flight Simulator SDK documentation and look for the simulation variables and key events sections. Contrastly, you can also directly from the simulator, while you are in a cockpit, you can also go to your settings, go to advanced, enable developer mode, then go up to the help at the top, and there is an option for Microsoft Flight Simulator SDK. You will use that if you are developing a software, add-on, etc. And then there is a section that says Microsoft Flight Simulator SDK documentation. The documentation will also have the variables in it. However, keep in mind that if you download that documentation, it will be rather large and it far expands just the events. It is literally documentation on everything and how to use the SDK. So for most, I would say just go to Google and search MSFS SDK documentation, and you should be able to find simulation variables and the key events section. For LVars, check the aircraft's developer documentation first. Many add-ons like PMDG, Phoenix, Fly-by-Wire, and Black Square publish their LVars list. If there's no documentation, you'll need a monitoring tool that can list all LVars for the aircraft that is currently loaded. Hangar Control and softwares like SPAD.next and I believe MobiFlight as well can do that automatically. When you pull up our SimConnect picker dialog, for example, in Hangar Control, it will automatically load the LVars as well, and you can sort by the LVars, and it will pull those automatically for you. Okay, for H events and B events, these unfortunately often require monitoring tools. Run the tool, click buttons in the cockpit, and watch what events fire. For B events specifically, some tools can enumerate all events directly. This is a new feature that has just come with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024's latest update, as we discussed earlier. Now, again, like in Hangar Control, when you pick up the SimConnect Picker dialog, it should automatically pull the B events that are currently available for that aircraft in the dialog, and you can sort by B events. If not, a great way to track B events, again, is the behaviors tool that we mentioned earlier, built directly within the simulator. So a few practical real-world examples of how this all comes together. Example 1 is the landing gear LED. Say I want an LED to light up when my landing gear is down. I need to read the gear state, that's going to be a SimVar, and then I'd use gear handle position or gear total percent extended. Both are universal SimVars that work on any aircraft. Then to toggle the landing gear button. Now I want a button to toggle the landing gear. Well, that's an action, so I need an event. The K event, gear toggle, works on all aircraft that I'm aware of. Simple and universal. Now going into example 3, we have the fly-by-wire A320FS button. But if I want to press a specific button on the fly-by-wire's A320FS panel, well, that's going to be aircraft specific. So I need to look up their LVars, H events, or now newly created the B events. The fly-by-wire team documents these. So I might use an LVar like A32NX FSL option and set it to a specific value, such as 1, 2, 3, or 4, and that will change whatever FS option that might correspond with. And finally, example 4 would be a G1000 button press. For pressing a soft key on the G1000, those are going to be your small buttons that are underneath the screen or surrounding it, I'd use an H event, something like AS1000 PFD soft key 1 through soft key 12, for the different buttons along the bottom. So I hope by bringing these little examples to you, it starts to shed some light on how and when to use these. So there you have it. The complete guide from Overkill Simulations to MSFS variables and events. A quick recap: SimVars, universal variables for reading aircraft state. K events, universal commands for triggering actions. LVars are custom variables from aircraft developers themselves. H events are HTML glass cockpit button triggers, things that would be like on a touchscreen in a real aircraft. B events, the modern standardized input system with 2024, making them very popular. The key is knowing that variables are for reading and events are for doing. Universal features use SimVars and K events. Custom aircraft features use LVars, H events, and B events. And finally, if you found this helpful, hit that subscribe button and check out the links in the description for the information that I provided above, such as the MSFS SDK. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.